Who and whose are both question words. Who asks about the person. Whose asks about the owner. Who was at the cinema? Jane and John were at the cinema. Who do you live with? I live with my parents. Whose coat is this? It's Jane's. This tells us that it belongs to Jane. The apostrophe S signifies possession. Whose birthday is in April? Mine is. This tells us that my birthday is in April. Who is coming with me? Whose brother are you? Whose turn is it? Who broke the plate? Whose is a possessive pronoun, and it asks about the ownership. Although they both sound exactly the same, whose with the apostrophe S is a contraction of who is or who has. Let's look at some examples. Whose pen is this? To whom does it belong? Whose idea was it? Who had the idea? Who's coming with me? Which person or persons will go? Who's got the remote control? Who has it in their possession? Whose car is in the garage? Who's coming for dinner tonight? Who's booked the hotel? Whose dog is waiting at the door? Who is a subject pronoun? Who does the action? Whom is an object pronoun, and that's concerned with who receives the action. Who is in charge here? Notice whose can be contracted to who apostrophe S, as in who's in charge here. Who's going to the cinema? I don't know who would want this job. Whom is an object pronoun, and it concerns with who receives the action. This is the man whom I told you about. Jane is the girl with whom I'm going to the party. To whom are you speaking? Now, in modern speech, whom has become rather old-fashioned sounding. So unless you want to sound very formal, who is preferred. This is the man whom I told you about. We could write this as, or say this as, this is the man who I told you about. To whom are you speaking? We could change this to, who are you speaking to? Now, in a sentence, a relative clause describes or gives information about a noun. This is the man whose sister I married. Whose sister I married is the relative clause, and the man is the noun. And the relative clause tells us who we got married to. She is the girl whom I met last night. This tells us I met the girl last night. This is Anna, whom you met at our party. Remember, unless you want to sound very formal, who is preferred. So you could say, this is Anna, who you met at our party. Whose can also function as a relative pronoun in the relative clause. For example, could the individual whose car is blocking the exit please move? The car belongs to the individual. As we've seen, who can also function as the relative pronoun. An actor who's admired by everyone. Who's admired by everyone is the relative clause, and it tells us about the actor. Again, who is can be contracted to whose. An author who's inspired many people, which means an author who has inspired many people. The woman who's wearing black is my teacher. The man whose hair is very short works for me. Hannah, whose children often play in the garden, is a friend of mine. It's Sarah who's very funny.